Hello and welcome to vVork. I'm Brian Watrous. This is the fourth in a 9-part video series in which we are going to be exploring how to build a VRO lab environment on top of VMware Fusion. In this particular video, what we'll be taking a look at is how to deploy the two virtualized ESX servers that we'll be using in our new VRO lab environment. As you can see here, the installation procedure has a number of different steps, but this is actually more straightforward than perhaps this looks. So to do the installation of each virtualized ESXi server, we're going to need to point to the ISO file that we downloaded earlier in video number 2. That's the ISO for the ESXi server installer. We're going to need to specify where we want to store the two virtual machines that are going to hold our virtualized ESXi servers. We're going to configure each virtualized ESXi server so that it has the virtual hardware that's necessary. In fact, that's one of the few places those two VMs are different. One needs to be bigger than the other in terms of its virtual memory configuration. We're going to allow network access. You'll see what that means shortly here in the demonstration. As we go through the installation of ESXi server, we're going to accept the end user license agreement. We're going to pick the one and only disk that we have available to us, which is a local disk. That'll be the disk where ESXi server gets installed. We'll get to pick which type of keyboard we want ESXi server to be configured to use. We'll set the root password for each of our ESXi servers. And then after doing that, going through the whole ESXi installation, we'll reboot each of our two new virtualized ESXi servers, and then we'll go through some post-installation configuration of each of those hosts. In this demonstration, I'll show you how to install our two virtualized ESXi hosts. As you'll recall from earlier parts of this video series, we are going to have two different hosts, and they're going to be sized slightly differently. One's going to be sized larger in order to accommodate the vCenter server virtual appliance, and the second virtualized ESXi host, the smaller one, is going to be the one on which we run our VRO server. Now you can shortcut this video and just watch the first part, see how to install one of the virtualized ESXi hosts, and then in the YouTube comments down below I'll put information about how to size the second virtualized ESXi server. Now, if you want to, you can watch the whole video, but again, to save you a little time, you can just watch the first part and read the comments down below. All right, so let's get started here. As you can see, I already have VMware Fusion up and running. The first thing I need to do is click on this little down arrow button here in order to choose to create a new folder. And all I'm doing with this folder is using it as a way to organize the virtual machines I'm about to create here and keep them separate from the other VMs that I have. So that part's not strictly necessary, but I like to keep things organized if I can. All right, so now that I have that folder, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click that same down arrow button, but this time I'm going to choose New. And up pops a wizard that gives me numerous choices about how to perform the installation, but I'm going to forego all those different choices there, and I'm going to simply choose Install Disk or Image. Excuse me, Install from Disk or Image. So I'll click there, then I'll click on the Continue button. And in the window that pops up, I'm going to click on this button here labeled Use Another Disk or Disk Image in order to allow me to select the ISO image that allows me to install ESXi. So I'll click that button, and then I'm going to go into my Documents folder. In here, I've already created a folder called Virtual Machines. In there, I created a folder called ISOs and OVFs, and in an earlier video, I showed you that I downloaded and installed all the pieces I need for my lab environment and stuck them here in this folder called VRO701. And the file that I'm looking for in particular, it's an ISO file, so let's see which one is it here. Is it this one? No, that's my vCenter server virtual appliance. This is the one I want here. So VMware VMvisor installer 6.0.0 update 2. This here is my ISO file for installing ESXi server. Okay, so now that I've selected it, I'll click Open, and then I'll click the Continue button. And at this point, it gives us information about the default sizing of this virtual machine that we're about to create. And recall that this one, our first virtualized ESXi host, is going to be our vCenter server host. and the host that runs the vCenter server virtual appliance needs to be larger. So by default, this VM in which we're going to run our virtualized ESXi host is only 4 gigabytes, and that's not enough to accommodate vCenter server virtual appliance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Customize Settings button so that I can change potentially various things, but in particular I need to change the amount of memory. So I'll click the Customize Settings button, and in the window that pops up, it's asking me for a folder and a file name in which to store this new host. So I'm going to go back into Documents, Virtual Machines once again, and I'm actually going to create myself a new folder here, again, just to keep things nice and organized. I'm going to click the New Folder button, and I'll call my new folder, let's see, I'm going to have multiple virtual machines, all of which are for this VRO lab environment. So let me create a folder, first of all, called VRO 701. And in there, I'm going to create a separate folder for each of my 2 ESXi hosts. So the first one, let's see, the first one's going to be called ESXi 6.0, let's see, .0, update 2, and again, this is going to be my folder for host 1. I'm actually going to do this twice, once for each of the 2 virtualized ESXi hosts. So let me copy that into my clipboard here. I'll click Create, and then let's scroll backwards a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing in advance for the second host. I'm not going to use this folder just yet, but I will shortly here. Okay, so in the host 1 folder, I'm going to save this virtual machine using essentially the same name again. So ESXi 600 update to host 1. That's going to be my host on which I run my vCenter server virtual appliance. So I'll continue by clicking the Save button. And as you can see, a window pops up. In the background there, that black window is going to be the console of my virtualized ESXi host. But before I actually begin the installation, the settings wizard pops up to allow me to configure all sorts of things about the virtual machine that I'm about to create here. So to begin with, I'm going to click on Processors and Memory. And in here, my virtualized ESXi host needs at least 2 cores. I could potentially choose more. My Mac has up to 8 cores, but I only need 2 here, so I'll leave it there. And then the key thing that I need to do in here is to bump up the amount of memory to 8 gigabytes. Otherwise, I won't be able to install the vCenter server virtual appliance. So I've gone from 4 gigs to 8 gigs. And if I want to, I can go down into advanced options and double check things here. The default settings here are actually perfect for what we need. But just double checking here, I'm checking to see that this first checkbox is checked. So enable hypervisor applications for this virtual machine is necessary because when you run a nested ESXi server within a virtual machine, we need this checkbox checked. The second checkbox we're going to leave unchecked because if we were to turn on code profiling, that could potentially have a small but measurable impact on the performance of this virtualized ESXi host. So I don't want code profiling. All right, so for CPU and memory, processors and memory, that's all I need to do. Essentially, all I had to do here is bump up the amount of memory. Everything else was just sort of extra explanation here. You just have to bump up the memory. I'll click the Show All button in the wizard to go back to this main screen here again. The next thing I'm going to do is go see how things are doing in the networking for this virtual machine. So I'll do so by clicking on Network Adapter. And in here, the main thing that I'm doing is making certain that I have Share with my Mac selected, which it is, in this case, by default. Once again, I could go down into advanced options and potentially change other things. For instance, I could plug in a customized MAC address for this first virtualized ESXi host, but I'm going to leave this blank, which is going to allow VMware Fusion to generate the MAC address automatically. So again, for Network Adapter, all I really need to do is choose Share with my Mac. Once again, I'm going to click the Show All button, and next up what I'm going to do is take a look at the configuration of this first virtualized ESXi host virtualized hard disk. So I'll click Hard Disk, and in here, this default file name is fine. The size is actually fine, but remember, one of my goals of setting up this virtualized environment in which we're going to run our VRO server is to make certain that the disk footprint is, and other resources are as small as possible. So I'm going to go into advanced options and I'm going to make certain that pre-allocate disk space is unchecked, which it is. So leave this one unchecked. It doesn't really matter for our purposes whether we split the VMDK into multiple files or not. I'll go ahead and let it do that. I'll leave this checkbox checked. And then essentially the only other thing that you could possibly do in here is change the bus type, but ESXi understands SCSI, so we'll leave this set to SCSI. And 40 gigabytes, again, since this is going to be a thin provision disk, it's not actually going to consume all 40 gigabytes, at least not initially. So that's going to give us potentially lots of room to grow into without actually consuming the space to start out with. All right, so there really wasn't anything I need to do here. All the defaults are fine, but just to show you what was going on, I've gone in there. Now I'm going to go into the Show All button again to go back to the main screen, and next up what I'm going to do is take a look at the CD-ROM configuration. Now this one's important because I need the CD-ROM to point to the ISO image for installing ESXi, which you'll recall earlier in this video, when I first started this process, I actually already selected the virtual CD-ROM. I should say I selected the ISO file for ESXi server. So this virtual CD-ROM is already set up. I'm double checking that this checkbox here is checked, otherwise ESXi won't see the ISO. And strictly it's not necessary, but I'm double checking that I've got the right ISO file here. This is the ISO file I selected before. It was the right one then, it's the right one now, so we're going to go with it. Under advanced options, nothing that you need to do. You could change the bus type, but ESXi understands IDE, so I'll just leave this set as is. All right, once again, go back to Show All. Potentially I could modify other things, but that's all I need to do for now. So I'm going to click the Close button to close the settings wizard. And then I'm going to power on the virtual machine. Now, as you might imagine, it's going to take a few moments to power on this virtual machine. So we're actually up and running. Actually, it's not the powering that takes a few moments, but once you hit Enter here, it's going to take a little bit for the ESXi installer to get up and running. So since this is going to take a little bit, in this instance, I'm going to speed up the video. And in fact, I'm going to do that at various points in this video just to save you some time. So let me get this video speeded up and we'll check in with this installation again in a few moments. The ESXi installer is up and running, and one of the things that you may have noticed while that video was going by is that a window has popped up. This is a window from Fusion reporting to us that this new virtual machine that we're creating, this virtualized ESXi server, wants to be able to monitor all the network traffic. Now, the short version of this here is I'm just going to type my administrator password to allow that. The long version is in order to enable ESXi to do things like go into promiscuous mode and see all the traffic on the network, we have to explicitly say that that's okay. So again, I'm just typing my administrative password for my MacBook Pro, and I'll click OK. All right, now I'm going to click in the window for Fusion to give keyboard focus to the ESXi installer virtual machine here. And as you can see, we have a welcome screen. All I need to do on the welcome screen is hit Enter. And on this screen here, we have the end user license agreement. So read the EULA, then accept it by typing F11. Quick little side note here. Forgive me, everyone out there who already knows this, but just in case somebody doesn't know this, on the MacBook Pro, if you want to send a function key, you're going to need to hit the FN key in the lower left-hand corner, then hit the F11. Again, my apologies to those of you who already know that. If you didn't know that, you might also need to be told that in the Mac that certain key sequences are mapped out by default. For instance, later on we're going to need to type function key 2, but function key 2 means something special on Mac. Again, if you go into the system preferences wizard within your MacBook Pro, you'll be able to undo the keyboard shortcuts that the Mac has turned on by default. Anyways, let's type function and then F11 to keep the installation rolling here. Again, this will take a few moments. And it's done. Okay, so what we see here is a list of all the virtual disks that my virtual machine can see. And as you can see here on the screen, there's only one virtual disk. This is the virtual disk that we created previously. So since I only have one choice here, there's nothing I can really do wrong. All I need to do is hit the enter key to continue. So I'll hit enter. On this screen here, I'm going to go with the default keyboard type. Obviously, if you are in a different part of the world and your keyboard looks different from mine, you'll want to choose something other than US default. I'm going to simply click the enter key. Now I get to assign a password. This is the password for my root account, so I'm going to set mine to capital V, capital M, WARE1, bang. Obviously, you'll want to choose something else. And I'm going to type that password again to confirm it, and then I'll hit enter to continue. Now it's ready to actually perform the installation, so I'll type function key 11. The installation is done. I'm going to hit enter to reboot. All right, so my newly installed ESXi server is up and running, and what I'm going to do next is do a little bit of customization to configure it exactly the way I need it configured. So to do so, I'm going to type function key 2. Again, if necessary, click in the window to give the window keyboard focus. I'm going to hit function key 2. Again, that's one of the keys that, if I recall correctly, is mapped differently in Mac by default. So go into System Preps, undo the mapping if necessary, but hit function key 2 and authenticate as root. You'll recall my password is VMware1 bang. I'll hit enter. And then in the Direct Console User Interface, the DCUI, I'm going to go down to, using my arrow key, I'm going to scroll down to Configure Management Network. I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to scroll down to IPv4 configuration and hit enter so that I can go and change how my virtualized ESXi host gets its IP address. As you can see, currently it's getting its IP address dynamically, and I don't actually want that. So what I'm going to do is use my arrow keys to scroll down to this third choice here, static. I'll hit the spacebar to select it, and then using the arrow key, I'm going to go down and change that IP address. So I don't want 172.16.245.132 because that's not what I specified back in the video when I created my DNS server entries. I said that the first host's IP address was going to be 172.16.245.101. So I make that change there. The default subnet mask is fine here, so I'll go 255.255.255.0. And the default gateway that's been selected here by default is correct, so we'll leave that alone. Again, all I really did here is set static and set the IP address for the first host. So I'll hit enter. And then under DNS configuration, again, arrow key down, hit enter to select DNS configuration. And here what I'm going to do is plug in my DNS server's IP address. So let's see here. For me, that's 10.0.0.100. Obviously, your DNS server IP address may be different. I don't have an alternate DNS server. If you do, you could plug that in here. I'm going to leave it blank. I'm going to change the host name to ESXi01.vvork.info. That's the name. That's the fully qualified domain name for my first ESXi server. Obviously, your host name is going to be different from mine because your domain name is not vvork.info. That's me, not you. So change the host name accordingly. I'm going to hit enter to continue. As you can see, I'm back on the Configure Management Network screen. To continue forwards, I'll hit the escape key. And when I do so, you notice a window pops up asking me whether I want to actually restart the management network. I need to say yes, so I'll type the letter Y. So that restarts the management network. And then to get out of here, I'm going to hit the escape key. And as you can see, I'm brought back to the the main screen once again. And that's it. That's it for the first host. Again, if you want to shortcut, you don't have to watch the rest of this video. You can just take a look at the comments in YouTube. Down in the comments, I'm going to put information about how to configure each of the hosts. If you understood how to install this first host from watching this video, you now understand how to configure the second host. All you need to do is make certain that you change the name of the host, change its size, change its IP address, and so forth. I'll put comments into the YouTube video. So down below in the YouTube comments, take a look there and you can see how to do the second host. But if you do want to see how to actually install the second host, and continue watching this video. All right, so let's see here. I've got my first host up and running. By the way, I'm going to take a little peek here in my memory to see if any swapping is going on. So no swapping currently going on. That's great. Again, I'm trying to create an environment that's small and compact and doesn't need a lot of memory, and consequently doesn't do any swapping if possible at all. Okay, so time to do the second host. As you can see, I've got my first host up and running. By the way, that's not actually in the folder here, so I'm going to drag it and put it in the folder. There we go. So first host is up and running. It's in its folder. And now what I'm going to do is create the second host. So once again, I'm going to click on the down arrow button up here and choose New. Again, I'm going to click on Install from Disk or Image, then click the Continue button. As I continue onwards here, again, this second virtualized ESXi server, just as a reminder, is going to be smaller because it's only going to be running the VRO server. All right, so let's continue onwards here. As you can see, the ISO that I used before is still selected, so I don't have to choose it again. I can just click on Continue. And in the case of the second virtual machine, the default values here are perfect. I don't have to change anything. But just in case, I'm going to go ahead and click on Customize Settings. And I'm going to select where to store this second host. So let me click back on Documents, Virtual Machines, VRO701. Again, this is going to be for the second host, and its name is going to be ESXi 6.0.0 Update 2 Host 2 for the second virtualized ESXi host. I'll click Save. And once again, the settings wizard pops up. And we can go stepping through these real quickly here. So processors and memory, we need 2 cores once again for our second virtualized ESXi host. Our second virtualized ESXi host doesn't have to be as large, so we're going to go with 4K. Again, we could double check here, but these default settings for the advanced options is fine. We want the first checkbox checked, second checkbox unchecked. We'll click on Show All. Let's see, what's next? The network. For the network adapter, we want to make certain that it says share with my Mac, so that's perfect. For hard disk, we need a virtual disk. 40 gigabytes is fine for our purposes. We're not actually going to use that much, but to save space, we'll make certain that we are not pre-allocating disk space. So first checkbox unchecked, that creates a thin provisioned disk, so we're looking good. Under CD-ROM, we're making certain that we have the right ISO selected and that the checkbox is checked. Excellent. So everything's looking good. We'll click on Show All. Let me just double check my notes here. Yeah, that's everything. We're going to go ahead and close the settings wizard. And we're going to power on our second virtualized ESXi host. As you can see, it starts booting. I'll speed things up a tiny bit here. I'll click in the window and hit Enter. And again, it'll take a few moments to get the ESXi installer up and running. Excellent. The ESXi installer is up and running. You can see, as before, once again a window has popped up asking me to say whether or not it's okay for this virtual machine to monitor all network traffic. I've taken the liberty to type my password. I'm going to simply click OK. I'll click in the Fusion window to give the installer keyboard focus. And again, I'm just going to quickly go through this installation. It's essentially just like the previous virtualized ESXi server that we installed before. So we'll hit Enter to continue. We'll type F11 to accept the end user license agreement. This second virtualized ESXi host, like the first one, only has one virtual disk, so it's the only one I can select. I'll hit enter to continue. I'll once again select US default for my keyboard type and hit enter. I'll type my password. Once again, my password's capital V, capital M, WARE, one bang. And then I'll kick off the installation by typing function key 11. The installation of our second ESXi server is done. To reboot it, I'll hit enter. And now our second virtualized ESXi host is up and running. But like the first one, it needs a little bit of configuration. So I'm going to click in the window and type function key 2 to go into the direct console user interface. I'll type my root password, VMware one bang, hit enter. And once again, the key things I need to do here is to go into configure management network, go to IPv4 configuration. I want to statically assign my IP address. And the IP address doesn't end in .134, it needs to end in .102. I'll go with the default subnet mask in the default gateway. And then under DNS configuration, I'm going to type in my DNS server's IP address. I don't have an alternate, so I'll leave that blank. And I'm going to type in my fully qualified domain name for my second ESXi server. Again, I'll hit enter to continue. I'll hit escape to get out of here. Type the letter Y to confirm that I do want the management network restarted. And then on the main screen of the DCUI, I'll hit escape. And at that point, I have my two virtualized ESXi hosts up and running. Let me go up and check memory, see how we're doing here. Let's see, so memory, nope, still no swapping. That's good. So we have our two virtualized ESXi servers up and running. That's it for the demonstration for this particular video. Be sure to check in on the next video, because what we'll be taking a look at in the next video is how to install the vSphere client in our VRO lab environment that we're building on top of VMware Fusion. So see you in the next video.